Good afternoon, my friends. The Detroit Lions just sent a message to the entire NFL, and honestly, this move says everything about how this organization now operates under Brad Holmes and Dan Campbell. After months of outside criticism, ridiculous trade speculation, and constant debates about whether linebackers should even be drafted in the first round, the Lions completely shut the noise down by extending Jack Campbell through 2030. And the crazy part is this feels like something Lions fans saw coming long before the national media did. The contract details immediately grabbed attention across the league. 4 years, $81 million total, with $51 million guaranteed, averaging $20.25 million per season. That now places Jack Campbell right near the top of the linebacker market, sitting behind names like Fred Warner and Roquan Smith in yearly value. The Lions didn't hesitate. They didn't wait around. They didn't gamble on another monster season, making the price even higher. They identified one of their foundational players and locked him in before the market exploded again. That is becoming the identity of this franchise. Every single offseason, there's another wave of criticism directed at Detroit's drafting philosophy. People said you do not draft a running back early. The Lions took Jahmyr Gibbs anyway. People said you do not draft an off-ball linebacker in the first round. Detroit ignored that too and selected Jack Campbell. Now look at where this team stands. Gibbs looks like one of the most explosive offensive weapons in football, while Jack Campbell has become an all-pro level defender and one of the emotional leaders of this defense. This extension feels bigger than just paying one player. It feels like validation for the entire vision Brad Holmes and Dan Campbell have built in Detroit. Because when you watch Jack Campbell play, you understand immediately why the Lions believed in him from the beginning. The size, the physicality, the intelligence, the toughness, the leadership. He represents exactly what this team wants to be. He fits the culture perfectly. He plays violent football, but he also plays disciplined football. He looks like the type of player that was built specifically for Detroit's identity. And what makes this even more important is the mentality the organization believes it has inside that locker room. The Lions clearly trust that when players like Jack Campbell get paid, their level of effort is not going to decrease. In fact, Detroit believes the opposite happens. This front office targets players whose mentality matches the culture, players that continue working harder after the contracts arrive. That's why the organization has felt comfortable rewarding its core stars early. We already saw it happen with Jared Goff. We saw it happen with Amon-Ra St. Brown. We saw it happen with Penei Sewell. And now Jack Campbell becomes the latest example. The Lions are no longer operating like a rebuilding franchise afraid to spend money. They are operating like a contender that knows exactly who its core players are. What also stood out throughout this entire situation was how many people outside Detroit completely misunderstood the Lions' strategy. There were endless conversations questioning why the team had not picked up Campbell's fifth-year option yet. Some fans from other organizations actually convinced themselves Detroit might move on from him. There were even trade ideas floating around involving teams trying to steal him away from the Lions. But internally, Detroit already knew exactly what they wanted to do. Instead of going through the typical process, they jumped directly toward a long-term extension. That's why this feels less like a surprise move and more like a calculated organizational decision that had probably been building behind the scenes for months. And honestly, Lions fans probably know exactly what comes next. Jahmyr Gibbs feels like the next major extension candidate. After that, you can easily see conversations eventually shifting towards Sam Laporta. Even Brian Branch was mentioned as someone the organization still strongly believes in despite injury concerns. Detroit clearly wants continuity. They want to draft elite young talent, develop that talent internally, and reward those players before they ever think about leaving. That philosophy has completely changed the perception of this franchise around the league. And maybe the most impressive part is that Jack Campbell has fully lived up to everything Detroit expected when they drafted him out of Iowa. The physical style, the grit, the mentality, the leadership. Lions fans remember how heavily criticized that pick was at the time. National analysts questioned positional value non-stop, but Detroit trusted the tape, trusted the fit, and trusted the player. Now, the Lions have one of the highest paid linebackers in football because they believed in their evaluation process while everyone else doubted it. That says a lot about where this franchise is today compared to where it used to be. Instead of constantly searching for answers every offseason, Detroit is now rewarding players who already became answers. And for fans watching this unfold, there's probably a very satisfying feeling seeing another one of Brad Holmes' most criticized draft picks turn into a long-term cornerstone for the organization. So now the big question becomes this: after seeing how aggressively the Lions are locking up their young stars, which player do you think should be the next major extension for Detroit? The scary part for the rest of the NFL is that this doesn't even feel like the Lions are close to slowing down. If anything, this extension proves Detroit believes its championship window is just getting started, and they are doing everything possible to keep the core together for the long haul. Because think about the pattern here. This front office is no longer reacting to situations after they become problems. They are moving early. They are identifying who truly represents the foundation of the franchise and making sure those players stay in Detroit before outside pressure, massive market jumps, or contract drama ever become distractions. That is exactly why this Jack Campbell extension matters beyond the numbers. The Lions are building stability. For years, Detroit was known as a team constantly restarting. Coaches changed, systems changed, rosters changed, core players left. Every few seasons, it felt like the organization was rebuilding from zero all over again. But now, for the first time in a very long time, the Lions actually have a recognizable identity that fans can trust season after season, and Jack Campbell is one of the clearest examples of that identity. This is a player that perfectly reflects the mentality Dan Campbell wants on defense. Physical, aggressive, smart, relentless. The kind of player who never takes a snap off. The kind of player teammates rally around. And honestly, when you look at the best defenses in football, they almost always have a linebacker who controls the emotional tone of the unit. Detroit believes Jack Campbell is becoming exactly that kind of centerpiece. What's interesting is how much confidence this organization now has in its own scouting process. Most franchises panic when the media questions their draft strategy. Detroit almost seems to enjoy ignoring the outside noise at this point. When the Lions drafted Jahmyr Gibbs early, critics exploded immediately. When they selected Jack Campbell in the first round, the reactions were even louder. Analysts kept screaming about positional value instead of evaluating the actual players. But Brad Holmes kept trusting his board, and now those same draft picks are turning into franchise cornerstones. That's why Lions fans are starting to defend this front office with so much confidence now, because the results are becoming impossible to ignore. The organization keeps finding players who not only produce on the field, but also completely buy into the culture. That combination is incredibly difficult to build in the NFL. You can also tell this extension sends a message directly into the locker room. The Lions are basically telling every young player on this roster, if you work, if you produce, if you represent this organization the right way, you will be rewarded. Detroit's not looking to constantly recycle talent. They want players to grow here, lead here, and stay here. That creates trust inside a locker room. And honestly, it probably motivates younger players even more when they watch teammates like Jack Campbell get rewarded this way. Players notice when organizations take care of their own. That matters across an entire roster. Another important detail here is how much Detroit seems willing to bet on mentality over fear. A lot of teams get terrified paying defenders early because they worry about regression, injuries, or declining effort after a major contract. But the Lions clearly believe the personalities they draft eliminate a lot of that risk. They specifically target players who love football, embrace hard work, and fit the Dan Campbell mentality everybody talks about. That's why fans inside Detroit are not reacting to this extension with fear. Most are reacting with excitement because they genuinely believe Jack Campbell will keep improving, and if that happens, this contract may actually look cheap in another year or two. That's the part many people outside Detroit are missing. The salary cap keeps rising. Elite defenders keep getting more expensive. If Jack Campbell continues developing into one of the best linebackers in football, the Lions may have secured one of the emotional leaders of their defense at a number that eventually looks extremely team-friendly. That's how smart organizations stay ahead. Instead of waiting for a player to become impossibly expensive, they move before the market explodes again. And this extension also reinforces something Lions fans have started saying constantly over the last few years. Brad Holmes and Dan Campbell truly seem aligned on everything. The vision feels connected from scouting, to drafting, to player development, to contracts. There's no confusion about the type of football player this organization wants anymore. That alignment is one of the biggest reasons Detroit transformed into a legitimate contender. Because now when the Lions draft somebody, fans already have a pretty good idea what kind of person and competitor that player probably is. Tough, physical, team first, obsessed with improving. Jack Campbell checks every single one of those boxes. And honestly, the reaction from fans says everything too. Instead of debating whether he deserved the extension, most Lions supporters immediately started celebrating the fact that another foundational piece is staying in Detroit long term. That's a completely different feeling compared to the uncertainty this franchise dealt with for years. Now the attention starts shifting toward who's next. Everybody already sees Jahmyr Gibbs coming. Fans are waiting for that announcement. Then eventually the conversations move toward Sam Laporta, Brian Branch, and the rest of this young nucleus that could keep Detroit competing for years if the organization continues managing the roster correctly. The Lions are no longer trying to prove they can build talent. Now they're proving they can sustain it. And after watching everything Jack Campbell has already become for this defense, there's a real argument that this extension could end up being remembered as one of the smartest long-term moves Brad Holmes has made so far. And what makes all of this even more dangerous for the rest of the NFC is that the Lions are building something that feels sustainable, not temporary. Usually when teams rise quickly, there's always this fear that the window is small, maybe 1 or 2 strong seasons, then contracts become a disaster, chemistry fades, and everything falls apart. But Detroit is trying to avoid that entire cycle before it even begins. That's why these extensions matter so much. The Lions are rewarding players before drama starts, before holdouts happen, before frustration builds, before agents begin using the media as leverage. Detroit is removing distractions early and making it clear who the organization believes in. And honestly, that confidence probably means a lot inside the locker room, because players notice when a franchise stands behind its core guys. They notice when teammates get drafted, develop into stars, and then actually get rewarded instead of being pushed aside for financial reasons. That creates belief in the system. It creates loyalty. And it creates the type of culture championship organizations usually have. Jack Campbell becoming one of the faces of this defense is symbolic of how far the Lions have come. A few years ago, Detroit was still trying to figure out who they were. Now they know exactly who they are. They want tough football players. They want leadership. They want accountability. They want players that love physical football and embrace pressure instead of avoiding it. That's why so many fans connected with Jack Campbell immediately after he arrived. He never felt like a flashy media superstar. He felt like a Detroit football player from day one. The way he carries himself, the way he plays,